Hey there. Thanks for hanging out with K-Dubs and listening to the podcast. Much appreciated. Check us out on YouTube. Shoot us an email. Let us know how we're doing. Hanging out with kdubs@gmail.com. And as always, enjoy the next episode. No, like I said, I like these just for the simple fact that you can hear yourself talk, so you know if you're getting too far away from the mic or too close or whatever.
They cancel out real well.
Yeah. And then you also can hear the other person just clear as a bell. You know, all background noise just kind of disappears. And
well, I will say this: when I opened that beer, though, it was pretty crisp. You could hear that.
Wait, I haven't done mine yet, so let's do it now.
Oh yeah, that last little pop. You can just.
We got to think. Well, at least for me, I'm having a little Busch Light peach. Now, I don't know if anybody out there likes Busch Light or not, but this is like a unicorn in a can.
And I will say, you had
so good.
You had me try one, and I'm sitting there going, these hot days and everything, something like that, I can go with that. Otherwise, I'm usually straight up a beer man, and give me a little lemonade and some bourbon on a hot day like this, or some vodka and lemonade.
Yeah, whatever.
We're good to go. But I got to say, 1-2 of those.
Oh, yeah, a couple of them, and they're just like, refreshing.
One of those that, fresh out of the cooler, tooth cracking cold. You got to have them tooth cracking cold.
Well, this one's pretty cold. I can tell you that. But, it's weird because when it came out, I was like, I don't know. I mean, I had their apple, and I wasn't just, pumped about their apple. It's like, yeah, it's good. But then I tried this. I'm like, whoa, this is a game changer here now.
Well, and like I said, their apple, to me, it was a Jolly Rancher in a can. I'm like, I'll take the Jolly Rancher. But that peach, I got to say, that'd be pretty good. And we were discussing a little bit, maybe spike that a little more, make it a kind of a highball with a little shot of vodka or maybe some the peach bourbon or whatever in it. Ooh.
Oh, yeah, that would really set it off, I think.
The only thing is I'd probably have way too many of them.
Feel like shit the next day.
Well, I'll probably find me laying out in the lawn somewhere. So,
where'd Max go? I don't know. He's supposed to be watching the grill. Max, where are you at? Suddenly you're out there flat down.
Yeah, getting a tan. Someone flipped me over. I'm done on one side. So
God, it is friggin' hot out. Like,
oh well. And I'll tell you what, it's summer. It's officially summer. And you know what? The humidity's not there.
No.
It's hot.
That's the nice thing so far.
It's hot, but it's not like the 90, 95 humid.
Well, we haven't had no rain.
Right.
So I got a question, because I'm going to ask this, and it's my opinion. Do you think that with all the fires going on in Canada and all that ash and stuff coming down here, do you think that's really affecting how dry we are right now?
Oh, I think definitely the heat. You've got that cap. That smoke is keeping it's doing twofold, I think, is what's happening here. It's giving us a little bit of shade, and that's what's keeping our temperatures and our humidity down. But it's also putting that cap on it where the atmosphere cannot build like it normally does, and
it's drier,
causing our lack of rain.
Yeah, that's my theory. My theory is it's getting up there and drying the atmosphere out, and all of a sudden clouds can't form. And if clouds can't form, we don't get moisture. And if we don't get moisture, this is why shit looks the way it looks.
Well, and I mean, we were discussing earlier, we were just down in Tennessee over the last weekend for a...
What'd you do down there?
Went down for a Classic Green Reunion, John Deere show.
Okay, so for somebody like me who's never heard of that, what is it?
Okay, so Classic Green is a club, but without stepping on any trademarks using the name John Deere or the phrase two-cylinder, and they want to be all-encompassing as far as John Deere equipment. Vintage, all the way up to the new. But it's a club, and they go together every 2 years. They have what they call Classic Green Reunion, and they move it around. So this would have been the third one. Well, the first one was in Grand Island 6 years ago.
Okay.
Or no, would have been 4 years ago. And then 21, it was in Columbus, Ohio. And then this year it was Lebanon, Tennessee. So, but they go around these different areas, and it's neat because a lot of two-cylinder stuff. This year they were commemorating the 100th anniversary of the Model D. So John Deere
100 years.
John Deere Model D, which was the first actual John Deere branded tractor was first produced in 23. They built 50 of them as a prototype or a pre-production run. So, yeah. And that tractor was built for 30 years in Deere's lineup. So from 23 to 53.
Yeah, I knew it was in the 30s and 40s, but I didn't realize that this is the 100th year for those.
Yeah, so 100th year anniversary of the Model D, and then that was one of their features. The other feature was the Type E hit and miss engines, which I can't tell you exactly what the date was on that. I want to say they bought Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company or Traction Company in 1918, and, well, Type E's came out, would have been 23, 24, so you're looking about the
100 years on that, too.
And then the other big one there were two other big ones that they did was the 110 lawnmowers. John Deere getting into the lawn and garden. Well, that's 60 years this year. It was 1963 was when they started lawn and garden.
Jesus.
Now, the other thing, and this, you're a little bit younger than I am.
Just a little.
But the other one was Generation 2 tractors. So the 30 series, so your 4430s, 4230, that was another feature down there.
In the 70s.
Yep. So it would have been 73. And that was pretty neat because there was one building that they had one of every 4,030. So 4230, 4430, 4630, open station, completely restored, just mint.
Gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, just drool over them. I would probably say the newest tractor on the grounds, they had an 8850 four-wheel
drive.
Which, of course, still had the original 955 Deere V8.
Good. I was just going to say, was that a reman on that one? Or?
No. That's a lot of them. They kind of figured out that 955. They used it in some industrial applications, but it worked good in those applications. But when they put them out in the field, that changing load and everything, that
didn't happen.
They just didn't hang in there. So a lot of them got Kinsey Repower or whatever.
Repower. That's the word I was looking for.
So there was one of those there that was pretty nice, but I mean, they were going for, they wanted to have 100 Ds at the show for the 100th anniversary. Well, of course, I've been in the hobby for years and run around all these shows, and
like your whole life.
If a lot of these big John Deere shows, if you got one, maybe 2 Ds at a show, it was amazing. They had 57 Ds.
No kidding.
And pretty much ranging. They didn't have one for every year, but
probably pretty close.
They came close. 23, they didn't have one, but they did have what they call a 53 streeter.
No, never heard of that.
So the streeter Ds, what it was when they announced they were going to end production, all of a sudden all the orders came in from down south in rice country, and that's a lot of them the orders came out of the rice country.
Big old tires and fenders on the back. And
Well, the Ds had built such a name for themselves of doing that slop work in the mud and everything in the rice fields that they got so many orders, and they'd already shut down the production line that they built, I think it was another 150 Ds in the street between the buildings. They actually had they had a makeshift assembly line, and they built these last 150 tractors in the street. Now, there aren't many survivors.
I bet not.
So
there's only 150, period.
There was from one Streeter D there, and it had been beautifully restored. And the neat part was I got to talk to the guy who owned it, and he told me the whole story, and I'll spare all that because that'll take a little bit. But he
shorten it up, Max.
Actually brought it and had the original owner's daughter coming to see the tractor. First time she'd seen it since he bought it from her. So last time she saw it was before the restoration. But when that tractor was shipped to the dealership, they built a set of what we call clamp-on duals. And they were very crude, but this guy went through and he had rice and cane tires, and he had the duals on it, duals all restored.
Really?
They did a little bit of revamp and clean it up so it didn't look quite
hokey.
Didn't quite look like Arkansas farmer build. But when they went through and did the restoration, I mean, the guy who did the restoration over the top, I mean, just shaving
You ain't
the
going to
paint.
find a better one.
Well, that tractor sitting there, and then they had, I believe they had a little model of that tractor built for the owner's daughter.
Oh, that's cool.
So she actually got to see the tractor redone and everything, and then they handed her a 1/16 scale model of the toy. And
that's awesome.
this will bring it back around to the whole classic green thing. They talk about it's about the people, and that's what that hobby is about. Is it's just that relationship that you get with the other people, the other people in the hobby. They're all great to get along with.
They got the same passion as everybody else.
We're all into the same thing.
Yeah,
and we're
exactly.
all want the same end result: is have a good time. Sit and visit, talk at tractors. And So it was an interesting show. Go down and see that, and just a lot of neat stuff. I mean, there was nice part was, of course, heat and everything down there in Tennessee was about what it was here. So
a little toasty.
Couple air conditioned buildings where you get in and out of the heat, and they had indoor vendors and swap meet. I mean, it was pretty much if you were a John Deere guy,
you want to be
the
there.
2 cylinders, it was worth the trip. So
good. I'm glad you guys had a good time. Yeah, I mean, I've heard of the classic green, but I never really knew what it was. So, getting a little more explanation on that's pretty cool. Yeah, and that's pretty cool to give that replica 1/16 to the daughter of the original owner of it. That's just cool. I mean, you don't hear of stuff like that.
Well, and just the fact that that tractor was in the original family up until I think it was probably 8-10 years ago. I think the guy bought the tractor. So, I mean, that just tells you how much some of these tractors mean to certain
absolutely.
families. I mean,
no different than you and I.
Right.
I mean, you got tractors that were owned by your dad, and do you have anything owned by your grandpa?
Yeah. I've got my grandpa's 44 Farmall H. It was
Oh,
the first
yeah, that's
tractor
right.
he
The
bought
H.
brand new.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, stuff like that you don't want to get rid of, because it's more of a sentimental value than it is anything. And the stories that you heard on those tractors, it's like it's no different than somebody with a classic car that was their father's, or a grandfather clock that was their great grandfather's. Stuff like that. It's not worth probably a lot to anybody else, but it means something to you.
It's no different. I mean, Grandpa gives you your first shotgun when you're a kid, and it happened to be a shotgun he grew up shooting. That's something that's going to be put up on the mantle in your home, or you're going to maybe go out and still deer hunt with it.
Who knows?
Duck hunt with it or whatever. But it's just that, it might be just an old Sears and Roebuck or whatever. It's a cheap gun.
Red Ryder.
Yeah. But it's been passed down through 2-3 generations.
Yeah, you don't see stuff like that.
No.
And when you do see it, you kind of want to cherish that just a little bit.
Well, and our society's getting further and further away from that as we get further along in life, that the younger kids don't have that valuation of the past. Like,
I appreciate the past, right? But I can't imagine farming out here in 1945.
Well,
the war's going on, and every kid, every able body that's 18 years old is drafted.
Some of them younger.
Some of them even younger.
That they lie about their age.
Exactly. And they leave the family farm because the family farm was just work back then. I mean, you had some 2-cylinder tractors and some old Farmall H's and maybe some Olivers and stuff back then, but it's not like it is today, working fields. Hell, it is today milking cows or feeding hogs or all that shit was by hand.
Right. Well, and you sit there and think about it. I mean, we'll go back to prime example. My grandpa's 44 Farmall H. First tractor he bought brand new. My mom's family, I think there were 6 brothers and sisters. That 44 Farmall H did all the tillage work, then did all the planting, then did all the cultivating.
And then did all the shit hauling
Right.
and grinding feed.
Yep.
And
It was hooked up to the grinder for pretty much a day. Grandpa, I think, was milking 35, 40 head of dairy. He had hogs.
that's a lot back
He
then.
had chickens. Well, but he had to work for us. It was 6 kids.
It's still a lot.
Baling hay. But then he still went around and custom baled,
That's how you made your money.
custom picked corn in the fall. And that's, I mean, you sit there and think about that. I mean, I remember Grandpa telling me stories that there was one year he picked 6,000 bushel of ear corn by hand
Whoa.
with a team of horses and a wagon.
Yeah, back then men were men.
It's no wonder, they were all thin and
Yeah, it was funny because I was listening to a podcast or I seen something where, they were talking about, there was a picture on a beach and it was from like 1968 or 1972. And like, look, there ain't a person that's overweight on that beach. I'm like, you know what it was like to work back then? I mean, everybody had to work back then. You had to get your ass off the couch in the morning and you had to go to work. I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but not sit at a computer for 8 hours a day.
Right.
They had to go work.
A lot of the
physically work.
a lot of the office jobs were just starting at that point. where
Yeah.
computers, some of the sit-down jobs were starting to come in.
Yeah, but they still had like administrative assistants and things like that, but that was all done with handwriting. There was no technology involved. But if you worked, you were working in a factory. You were farming. When you were building cars in a factory, you were. There was no power tools and hand wrenches.
Hand
and
wrench. There was
you were
some
on
pneumatic and electric stuff,
Yeah.
but not like we see now.
So when you think back to that picture of the people on a beach and there wasn't nobody overweight there, but the technology is the reason that changed.
Right.
Because technology is making our life easier. When you get easier, maybe you tend to get a little bit more lazier.
It's made us lazier. I mean,
Efficiency wise, I think it's helped out a lot.
well, and just I mean, hybrid seed corn, all the hybrid seeds, everything else, all the stuff that is stemmed from that technology. But yet, when you go back to it, you got to go back grassroots.
You do.
That's that whole thing of we can take our whole existence to 6 inches of topsoil and the fact that it rains. Now, granted, we're having a little bit of a shortage on the rain part here.
Yeah,
lately.
no shit. It could definitely turn around and give us a few inches.
Well, yeah, and
That's what she said.
You beat me to it. But yeah, you just look at it, and even with the technology and everything, it's still all of us still got to eat because it rains, and there's still farmers out there that want to keep doing the job that. And you look at the amount of farmers that were years ago. You go back to the whole thing. You can't imagine even running this farm here with a Farm All H or an M. And I sit there, I run the stuff.
You do.
And I sit there and think about all those guys that, like you were talking, I want off this farm in the worst way. It's World War II. Yeah,
Draft me, baby. Let's go.
I'm 15 years old. I'm going to lie about my age so I can go to war. But they were going to war for the right reasons. They wanted to protect our country and
Absolutely.
and do the right thing.
Absolutely.
And that's the way they were raised back then. But they would lie about that just to get off the farm because it was backbreaking work. And you set out on that tractor, it was 8-10 hours a day on the tractor. Plus, you still had chores to do in the morning,
and
milk,
chickens to feed,
and the milking and all that. Well, that was a break from the field work.
exactly.
But yet, you still had to do that, and then think about when they were farming with horses.
Yeah,
You had to stop every few hours, feed, water horses, and
yeah. Think about that stuff and go, man. The way of farming has really changed, especially just over the last 15 years, right? Because if you think the way it was back in the 40s, 30s, and 40s and 50s, you had to be diverse. You had to have your cows, you had to have your chickens, you had to have your field crop, because that was the only way you could make a living.
well, you weren't going to the grocery store.
Correct.
Every couple days, I'm out of eggs. I'll stop on my way home from work.
You were on the farm.
You were on
There
the
is
farm.
no work. You weren't driving to work. The
No.
work was outside the door.
You set foot out your back door, and
There's a job.
there's your supermarket. There's your job. There's your livelihood. And, that's part of also what contributed to all of us being lazier is that we didn't have to grow our own food and work to survive.
The big thing, you look back at it then, and you had to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it today, it takes a crew to do that.
Right.
Because everything is, first of all, farming is very expensive, right? It's expensive to grow the crop. It's expensive to buy the ground, rent the ground, the equipment, your time,
inputs.
your energy, the chemicals, everything. It's just so expensive. So is it really worth being diverse now? Because the way I look at it is you're not really putting all your eggs in one basket because you can grow different crops, right? You can grow your corn, you can grow popcorn, you can grow soybeans, you can grow wheat. There's people up here that grow different things outside of that. Hemp. There's many different things in your bag or in your box that you can manipulate to grow. But the thing that I'm getting at is because it's so expensive, you don't want to take time away from managing that to go milk your cows
Right.
or to go take care of your, unless you got, 10 beef cattle out there and 15 hogs, but that's still every day.
Right.
But it's not the time consuming like having to milk 15 cows and then having to go
Right.
feed the steers and take care of the calves and then go feed the chickens and make sure the pigs out back have water, and because that takes away from all of your grain farming.
Right.
So in today's world, I believe that you kind of got to be
Right.
focused on
You got
one major thing.
you specialize in a corn soybean rotation.
You got it.
Or you do
Specialize was the word I was
or you're doing hay. Or you're doing both and you're still running a small herd of cattle, but you're raising the corn, your beans, or any other feed, to take care of your animals.
I agree with that. This podcast episode is sponsored by Dan's Diesel Performance. If you're looking to improve your truck's performance, efficiency, or appearance, check out Dan's Diesel Performance. They manufacture turbochargers, fuel injectors, fuel pumps, transmissions, intake piping, and much, much more. Plus, they offer all the top brands in the diesel industry. They're located in Machesney Park, Illinois. Visit their website at dansdieselperformance.com or give them a call at 815-977-5865. Well, when I was young, Dad had 100 hogs running around the farm all the time, because back then you had to be diverse. Crops back then were $1.80 a bushel. Right. Yeah. Now don't get me wrong. Corn seed was way cheaper. Right. Rent was way cheaper. Ground was way cheaper. But everything goes in percentages, right? The world's moving forward now. We're getting to be where everything's starting to be higher priced. But back then, you had to be diverse if you were farming, because I think the big thing was there was so many smaller farms.
Right.
So it wasn't one person farming 1,000 acres or 2,000 acres or 3,000. And if those guys were farming that kind of ground, boy, were they big.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you sit there and think about that back then. If a guy was farming 1,500, he was a big farmer.
It's 7720s and
yeah, he was the 8820 owner.
Yeah,
but
or the 9600 or when they came out. But since then, it seems like the bigger farmers are getting bigger and the smaller farmers are getting smaller. So in the grain side of things, hell, even in the dairy side and hog side of stuff, think about how many dairy farms used to be around here 30 years ago. And then you look at what they are now, and it's tenfold.
My dad always used to say he grew up on River Road, just north of Marengo. That's where I grew up. And he goes, I remember, any place that had a barn was a dairy.
Animals.
That was a dairy farm. He goes, and River Road is not that long. It only covers like the west end of McHenry County.
Yeah.
Pretty much from Millstream Road to the county line.
Pretty much.
And Dad said that he can remember when he was a kid, there was 30 or 40 dairy farms in that stretch.
Really?
And the last one that finally pulled the plug here 2-3 years ago was Neil Gieske. I mean, our place is a dairy farm. I think my dad was born in 51. I think the cows were gone in 54, 55. He can remember them dairying. He remembers going up and getting the cattle from what is now Marengo Ridge, Cundy's Woods, because they used to pasture them up there.
Oh, it'd be a perfect place to pasture them.
And actually through our farm, they had just a narrow channel that ran up through the middle of the farm that was all fenced, and they go up and run the cattle down. But in the summer, it was all shaded. It was a beautiful area.
Plenty of grass to eat.
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, you look at that and how that's changed over the years. But, yeah, it was just one by one. They just started dropping.
Well, that dairy farming, that's an everyday, twice a day thing.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be. With the technology now that we have with automatic robots and carousels and parlors and things like that, it does help. Right.
Well, yeah, it does.
But it's still a full-time job, no matter how you look at it.
You got herd management. You still got feed. And I grew up watching my uncles on my mom's side of the family. 3 of them dairied. 2 of them over by Union. The other one ended up going up by Medford, Wisconsin on his own. And, I mean, I remember watching them when I was growing up, 30, 40. I think biggest one was 50, maybe 60 head herd.
Mm-hmm.
Dump stations. Both of them down here never had pipeline. It was dump station.
Yep.
Had vacuum line, put the machine on. You sit there and hope cow didn't kick the machine because your whole basket of milk and everything
is right there.
The cow caught it and knocked it all loose. It was all going in the gutter.
Yep. That's why they always say a dairy farmer never cries over spilt milk.
Right. Well, then you'd sit there and you watch them, grab a machine, walk over, step on the lever, dump it, go back over, do it. And I watched him. I mean, the biggest one was he could probably run 40 head in the barn at one time, and he'd go through, get done, and run those out and run the other 20 in. So just when you think you're done, now you run another 20 cows in, go through and start all over.
Yep. It definitely takes somebody who really loves cows to milk them.
Right.
If you don't really love them, you don't want to milk them.
No, I always loved going over there, get off of work or whatever, and just the sight, the smells. I love being around it. God, no, I could not.
No.
I enjoyed it. I know you had a little bit of background in your younger years helping out dairy farmers in the area.
Yep.
You learned a lot about life.
You learned a lot. There was no doubt about that.
And, I mean, dairy farmer, he's kind of a master of his own domain. I mean, you got crops, you got animal care, you got your animal nutrition.
All of that is involved.
You're probably, I would say, a degree away from being a veterinarian with some of the stuff you got to get into. I mean, there's a lot of people.
At least
it's
with
just
cows anyway, right?
It's just a piece of paper. I mean, but I know quite a few dairy farmers that ain't afraid to do a lot of their own work if they have to.
Well, again, everything's so expensive.
Right.
Vets are expensive nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to give them a penicillin shot, hey, we can do that. We know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And most now, whether it's dairy farming or cattle, just in general, a lot of them figure out how to AI by themselves.
Right.
So then there's no bulls involved, so you don't got to worry about that whole fiasco.
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, because when they have a bad day, everybody has a bad day.
Yeah.
But so if you learn how to AI, you can save just a ton of money and a ton of time doing it that way. And it's way more efficient, too.
Just a feed bill of feeding the bull, having him around, and then you can't have
or
that bull.
bulls.
Yeah, you can't have that bull around forever. You got to cycle them out, otherwise, we can't have.
We don't want any of that going on.
No, you don't need any of that. And I mean, it's amazing. I mean, and there's a lot of management.
Yeah,
with the dairy side of stuff, and that scares a lot of people off.
I don't know if it. I think that every day scares everybody off.
Well,
it's morning and night. Whether you're sick, whether you're hungover, whether your wife's having a baby, whether your grandpa just died. It is every day. Now, the good thing about that is you're your own boss, right? So you screw up, you know who to blame but you. But you do really A-okay, that's on you too.
And you know, there's been a lot of families just in here in the Harvard area that it's raised a lot of families and taught a lot of family values and work ethic and everything else of being raised on a dairy farm.
Absolutely.
And just being raised on a farm in general. It doesn't matter. I mean, my background, small farm, my dad worked off the farm.
Mine too.
But that taught us our work ethic that has made us into the men that we are now.
Yeah, men that we are.
You know, that we sit around here drinking beer and talking into microphones now.
The technology, man.
Yeah, once again.
Technology.
You know? But, you know, it's how things go. And anyone that knows me knows I love talking about the old times.
Oh, yeah.
The way things were done.
Because it's probably never going to go back to that. I was talking earlier about different crops and stuff that grain farmers run on, and you kind of grow something unique.
Well, we're maybe thinking about trying to expand into something, and right now it's going okay, but not as planned.
Well, you got to start, right? That's
it's baby steps.
Step one is to start, and that is
popcorn.
Where
we've been playing around with it the last few years. My brother, of course, is a popcorn fiend. He loves popcorn, and I mean, to the point that one of those big Tupperware bowls, he's the type that will pop one of those full, and maybe one or two other people get a handful of it. He'll eat that whole bowl in one setting. So he decided, well, I want to try this. You know, can you guys set aside a little bit of ground? So we did it. And, of course, we set aside. In the first couple of years, it went better than expected. And, I mean, I think the one year we planted 2.5 pounds of popcorn, and we ended up with almost 500 pounds of shelled popcorn out of 2.5. I mean, it yielded unbelievable. I'm like, man, that's...
Okay, so obviously you're not – is that seeds per acre then, popcorn, or is that pounds per acre, or how does that work?
Typically, with like this year, we went up to just like an 1.25 acres, I want to say is what we did. And typically, because it's such a small footprint, you know, you're talking like in your field corn – I usually plant on 30-inch rows, 20,000 population.
Yeah, I think most farmers are in that 30 range.
When you
and range from there.
But with the popcorn, it's usually you're buying it by the pound, and they'll tell you how many seeds are in a pound. So actually, it's a good thing we're talking about this because my brother just brought it up yesterday. Because Valerie Purdum's father-in-law was over.
Okay.
Was over, and he was asking us, hey, if there's any left over or you got some excess, I'd be interested in maybe getting some from you.
Cool.
So he was asking us, well, how much did you plant and everything else? He looked at me, and I go, well, I'm not the brains of the operation. The brains is over there.
I'm the peon here. I just drive the shit.
I'm just a dumb laborer. I'm the guy that supplies the labor, the tractors, and the equipment. So, but I think, from what my brother said, that 1.25 acres, it was somewhere right around 8,000 to 10,000 seeds.
Oh, total.
Is what we planted total. Wow. And of course, it's trying to find the plates that are the right size for that popcorn.
Well, on your old planter,
and we're going old school. We're running a 494 planter with plates. So there's 2-3 hills or 2 or 3 seeds in a drop, so it's probably a little bit thicker, but you slow the planter down. It's a matter of knowing your equipment and how to
adjust that, right? Yeah.
And a lot of it's just kind of just cover one eye and go, yeah, we'll set that there. And of course,
come on, no whammy.
Yeah, and we did have a whammy this spring.
Oof.
He goes through and he goes, all right, this should be enough to do this. We're going off of our numbers before of planting on a smaller scale. He goes, all right, this should be more than enough to do what we're wanting to do. we get out there, and I make about 3 passes with the planter, and he goes, he goes, my mass off. It was only about half of what we needed. So we end up having to buy more seed. And of course, that's the fun part. Like I said, you don't know when you're going to have them doubles and triples come out of the planter. So it runs out a lot faster. And that's where I like planting my field corn, because I just dump it in, and I can watch the little rods on the top of the planter box go down. And I'm like, all right, it's about that far from down. I got to go get out and check and see where we're at. Well, when it's
already there,
barely enough to cover the plate in the bottom of the hopper. So then I'm planting at a real slow speed. My brother's walking along behind. But it's something we've done, and we have fun with it. It seems like the last few years the yield has gone down and down, but it's also because, excuse me, it's good beer.
God damn Pabst. Always giving the burpees.
But it seems like the yield's been getting lower and lower every year, but we've had different weather conditions, soil conditions.
Yeah, it changes monthly.
And I mean, it's real easy to weed control can wipe it out. And of course, I think I probably grow a better crop of ragweed than about anyone else in the county. But it's something we started, and we're just trying to expand a little bit more, because, you know, when you're only farming 15 acres, you're looking for something that maybe a little more profit advantage off of
just field corn, or just soybeans, or something like that.
And we're kicking it around. Like I said, baby steps. You know, you just kind of play with a little bit. Right now, if I don't get some rain soon, I'm don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, you're pretty hilly right there where you're at.
We got those red clay hills, and you try hitting them at the right time, and you can't ever get all of it at the right time.
No, and with the lack of moisture that we've had, them clay hills become pretty hard.
Oh, yeah. Well, I went through, I was telling you earlier, spent the last 2 days of my vacation, which would have been yesterday and the day before, sitting on a 37B John Deere cultivating my field corn. And you've got corn that's just coming out of the ground, and you got corn that's like this.
The good stuff.
And it just goes like that across the field. Well, yesterday I did about 5.5 acres, the big field that I've got.
Yeah.
And out of that 5.5 acres, I probably cultivated 2, maybe 2.5 acres of corn. The rest of it was, I think this is where my planter rows are, and I'm going across the top of this hill. And it sounded like I had the cultivator shovels running through gravel.
Oh, man.
And corn did not germinate. That was planted the Sunday before Memorial Day. A week before, I could not even get a tractor to that field because it was so wet in the low ground.
Yeah.
4 days later, I'm out there trying to field cultivate, and I can't even get the field cultivator going. And that's with the red clay, you always run that risk. You got to hit it.
You got to find that happy medium.
Mm-hmm.
Some spots it's going to be too wet. Some spots it's going to be too dry.
And this year, it's the first time I've seen it where corn did not germinate. I mean, it just flat out didn't. And where it did, it was maybe 2-3 inches tall, maybe 3-4 leaf stage, and it's all gray and curled up. And I'm like,
looking rough.
Yeah, if it doesn't get some rain here in another week, it's done. I mean,
well, look at the bright side. Then at least you get to play with your tractors in the middle of summer and not when it's freezing cold in the fall.
What? I don't even like being out there cultivating when it's hot and sunny like that. I don't know if I want to go out and have to cry about tilling all this stuff under right away.
God, I feel for you. But just blows.
We'll see. I mean, and that's the fun part, is at least I'm on a small enough scale. You know what?
It's not going to break you. That's the good thing.
No.
You still got your full-time job doing what you normally do, and
my equipment's paid for when I bring it home. So, I mean, if I'm out anything, I'm out not getting to go enjoy it this fall, going out combine. But the other 2 fields, like I said, they look actually pretty decent. Rain here 7 to 10 days, make or break.
Well,
for at least this stage, anyway.
Yeah, I think when this comes out, I think hopefully we'll have a little rain by the time this thing comes out. They're talking Sunday and Monday, so it'd be nice to get something. Yeah, it's starting to curl. Does popcorn need more moisture, or does it do better with less moisture?
It's pretty much right there with your field
with
corn.
the field corn?
The big thing is your popcorn's going to stay shorter, so I don't think it needs quite the moisture that your field corn does, because, of course, everything's smaller on it. I mean, your ear's a quarter the size around, although a couple of the varieties we've grown will get a good 10 to 12-inch ear on it.
Yeah.
But it's only maybe about the size of a broomstick.
So do you guys pull the kernels off the cob?
What we do is we go out, we pick by hand. And I'm going to say what we pick into, and you're going to understand it, but those at home aren't going to understand it. You remember the half pallet and quarter pallet cardboard boxes that we always got our parts in at the dealership?
Yeah, they were
you broke
up to 3.5 feet tall. Yeah. I think they were 2.5 by 2.5 or 3 by 3.
The full would be the tall ones, and then the quarters or the halves would be the shorter ones, and then the quarters were you put two of them together and make a
yeah.
Well, I've got a bunch of those because those always got broke down and just thrown out. There's no deposit on them from deer. Well, I've grabbed a bunch of those over the years and have those just sitting in storage. I slide those on the forks of the skid loader. We go out, drop them at the end of the row, and then you walk down the rows with a 5-gallon bucket picking the ears of popcorn by hand.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll bring them down, usually let them sit in those quarter pallet or the cardboard boxes for a week, maybe 2, just to dry them down a little bit more. Optimum is like 14%, so just like your field corn. And what my brother does, he'll sit there and shell an ear, and he'll do a pop test. So he'll throw it in the hot air popper or into the oil in the pan and pop some of it. And usually if it's 85-90% of it pops, you go, yeah, we're just about there. And that's usually when we'll shell it. And then that's when the fun starts.
You guys hand shell it all?
Some. What we do is we've got my dad, of course, years ago restored a 1926 John Deere Type E hit and miss. And I ended up buying a old John Deere hand sheller that you would have had to crank on it. And of course, we got a little more modern with it and set up with a belt pulley, and I run it with a flat belt off the engine.
Yeah, modern with a belt pulley.
So we sit there and just an old flat belt, and I'll usually set the engine up just outside the shop, and then run the flat belt into the shop and nice concrete floor and everything so we can kind of clean up. Actually, 2 years ago we shelled. I still got popcorn I'm finding in the corners of the shop.
Damn mice taking them in the corners of the shop. How dare you?
It ain't the mice. It's just the way everything flies. But you sit there and we'll run them through, and then you'll end up, it'll take, I would say, 75 to 80, 85% of the kernels off. Well, and the rest of it, you sit there by hand.
And
just finish it off.
Yeah.
And we might run it through the sheller 2-3 times, but you'll actually see as it goes through, it'll be just kind of a twist around it, so it kind of corkscrews, and that'll be left. Or it'll leave the nubbins on the end.
Yeah, usually
you sit there and shell those off. And then after that, then they go into plastic totes. And if it's not quite dry enough, my brother will leave those sitting in the house, just in totes like this, and about every 24, 48 hours, he'll stir it and just let that dry air at a furnace running in November, December.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll just dry it out, but it's got to be a small enough container.
So everything gets...
Right. So then he stirs it so it just kind of, it wicks the moisture out of there. And then once it gets to that, and he goes through, does another pop test. And a lot of it, the last few years, last year was kind of a flop. The year before, I mean, the stuff we've been growing, it's been like 95 to 98% pop rate.
Wow, that's great.
So I mean,
right? Sounds great.
Very few old maids. You know, you go through and do your microwave popcorn, and you sit there and you go and dump it out, and you hear all of them hit the bottom. And then you're sitting there when you get down the last little piece, and you're sitting there going, God, I hope I don't get one of them old maids crack a tooth or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I would say if you're probably above 80% pop rate, you're doing good. And we've tried some different varieties in that, and probably one of my favorite was the mushroom popcorn. And what that does is that's if you get your caramel corn, or you buy your tins at Farm and Fleet or whatever around the holidays, it has your caramel, your butter, and your cheese popcorn all in one tin.
Yeah.
And it just nice big, probably the size of a big marble size fluffy kernel.
Pickle or something
Yeah.
like that.
That's the mushroom variety.
Gotcha.
So they puff up a little bit bigger. Otherwise, the big popular one is usually, it seems like everyone wants the white popcorn, and it's just a matter of the kernels is all it is. Whether it's white and it pops up white, or the yellow will have a little yellow tint to it. And
Does Ben keep it all for himself?
he has the last few years. He gives a lot of it away the last.
I'm sure.
Someone,
But that's kind of a cool Christmas gift or something.
Right.
And be like, hey, this is popcorn that I grew out of my field. Tell me what you think about it.
well, our local two-cylinder club, there for a few years when we had real good crop, we'd always sit there and promote that, hey, the ground was worked with a two-cylinder John Deere. It was planted with a 494 planter. It's harvested by hand, and then it was shelled with a Type E. And
That's just cool.
we'd just sell it, it was just a donation to the club, and they'd sell it on their fun auction. We'd get sometimes maybe 10, 15 bucks for a Ziploc bag full of it, maybe about a pound. And all of a sudden, I'm like, we need to try doing a little bit more of this. And that was all of a sudden my scheme in the last year. And, of course, best laid plans, it just.
Yeah, what they say, tell God you're planning to watch him laugh.
Yeah.
That's what he says.
Yep. And so far, he's laughing.
He's laughing.
I'm thinking I may be the reason why it's a drought year, but
Thanks, Max.
you had to try that popcorn scheme, didn't you?
God damn it. No.
But,
it's cool, though. It's something different. It's something
Right.
unique. I don't know anybody else that's growing popcorn in the area. Maybe people do, but I haven't heard of it.
A lot of the smaller farmers, the CSAs, stuff like that, a lot of them you're going to see at the food truck or the farmers markets is what I'm looking at.
Right.
There's some of them that are growing it. It's just, with me, it was just kind of something we could try as a little bit of a niche market and play around.
Playing around is to me, if you're grain farming, you got to play around some. You got to change something every year, whether it's growing popcorn or trying different varieties or trying this new nutritional conglomeration up to put on your beans or your corn. Or it's just fun to do that, because then you can look at it and be like, oh, hey, we've seen something here. And it might be in the tissue samples, or it might be in the soil samples, but you can be like, hey, I've seen something. And the corn seems to be looking like
healthier,
it's appreciating
darker
it.
green,
Yeah.
better veins in the leaves or whatever.
And to me, that's how you get better.
Right. But the thing is being able to repeat it
Well,
every year to year. And
That's the tough part.
But that's the thing, is what worked last year. And that's I guess the one thing that keeps a lot of the guys farming, that
change.
It's every year it's different.
Yep.
You can sit there, and I've bought corn seed, and I'll buy the same seed corn 2-3 years in a row, hoping, because that first year you put that in, like, oh man, that stuff yielded awesome.
Did great.
But then the next year you go, yeah, that didn't.
What did I do wrong?
Yeah, that was kind of a flop this year.
This is bullshit.
And then the third year you put it in, and you look like you're a freaking genius again. And you're like, oh, all right. Then the next year,
Get you
I probably
excited
tried
again,
something
like,
else.
yes.
And the big thing is, I've always enjoyed having the friends like you, that you've got a background with the seeds and with selling them and figuring out traits and that, and then your brother. And I've always had a good circle of friends that can go, hey, this is what's going to work on your soil, because we've tried it on ours. And every one of them will tell you it depends on what you get for weather year to year.
Mother Nature, she will make you or break you.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is I'm doing it to have fun. I
Right.
That's no different. You had Dean Beck on here, and it's the same thing for him and his dad. They're out there. They're doing it the same way I am. It's just go out there and have fun. They enjoy it, and that's how we've gotten to know each other, was just through the hobby,
The 2-cylinder stuff.
the tractors, and
Yep.
and we'll bounce ideas off of each other sometimes, and they'll be working on something, they'll call me, or if I need a hand with something, I can call Dean or Dan. They're right there.
Yeah.
Or hey, nah, I don't have time this weekend, but yeah, this is what we do for this or that. And having that network, it's once again, it all comes back to your circle of friends.
It all comes back to the people you know.
Right. And you know, you can have the ones that you get along with, or sometimes it's the ones you don't get along with, but they'll still, you learn something from everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that as human nature, at least my human nature is I like to learn. And I don't like to sit down and read a book and learn. I will fall asleep before I hit the end of the first page. But to have, that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, right? Because I get to have all different walks of life come in here, and I get to pick people's brains on how they think and why they think a certain way, or this specific way, or that specific way. So to me, I'm reading a book, but I'm more getting, I'm more listening to an audio book,
right.
You know, when I have people that come in here, because it's just, it's interesting, because we've come from different walks of life, but we get along really well. But you know so much about 2-cylinders and about lawn and garden tractors, and I don't know a whole lot. 2-cylinders is because they got 2 cylinders that go up and down. They go pop, 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 pop.
Well, most of them, they don't go up and down. They go back and forth.
That way too, sideways as well. Exactly. But it's fun that hopefully, like, even when my guests come here, I hope they learn something from me like I learned from them. And it's been a blast to do it. It just really has. So that network is pretty cool to be able to expand that network.
Well, and I'll tell you what, I got it. I'll be honest with you. I'm a little bit behind on watching all the podcasts.
Jeez.
But
only an hour a week, you know.
I know, but you know, wife, work, farm, kid.
How long does it take you to get to the farm from work?
About 7 minutes. 15.
From the work to farm?
Yeah.
There's half a podcast going to the farm.
I know, but I hate stopping in the middle of anything too. So actually,
just giving you shit.
Actually, this winter, what I was doing was a lot of times after you started this, when I was down there working in the shop getting stuff ready to go, I'd pull it up on the phone and just have that playing in the background and be listening. Well, then of course all of a sudden, you know, there is visual, so then I'm like, find myself sitting there at the workbench. Watching it on YouTube, going, I'm getting.
I am getting nothing
I'm
done
getting
right
nothing
now.
done, but god dang, you know, and what it'll be is, like you said, you learn something, and all of a sudden, and you've had a whole different.
And I hope to keep expanding. I hope to keep that going, to get more and more walks of life in here. To
Well, and it's every week. It's someone different, and you talk about different topics, and that's the fun part of it. Is that I sit there and go, well, I recognize that guy as soon as I'll see him. I go, well, I know him. I've seen him at the dealership or seen him in passing. You know, I never did much in Harvard until I started working in Harvard, and now being up there 20-some years, you get to know a lot of the people in town. And you go, a Marengo boy going into Harvard, it takes 20 years before you're accepted as you work in Harvard, and you might be allowed to do certain things.
Get back to your hometown.
You can go into places, and all of a sudden someone will look at you and go, I smell Marengo.
It's got to be the water down there.
And I sit there and go,
I'm kidding to everybody down in Marengo. I'm kidding.
I'm sitting there going, how could you smell that? But they're like, and I've had it happen to me. But and now a lot of people have accepted me and know me because I've been up there so long. But yeah, just the whole different group of people that you have on here. It's always a lot of fun. I mean, you've had Valerie Prudhomme and Cody kind of sitting off to the side, but
yeah, he was when Valerie had questions. He was hey, this is what we did. Do you remember? Oh yeah, that's what it was. That turned out well. Turned out really well.
But I've made, I wouldn't say I've made friendships out of the whole thing of everyone that you've had on here, but it's people that now if I see them out and about town, or
I know that person,
or see them at a mutual friend's party or whatever, we've got something in common. And you know what? That brings the world a lot closer together.
And I think we need a little more of that.
Oh, definitely. The world needs a lot of just...
We're divided.
Yeah. Just different walks of life. I mean, people that I normally wouldn't talk to, all of a sudden, hey, you did the podcast with Kyle, didn't you? Yeah, didn't you? Yeah. All of a sudden, you got some common ground. And you start talking and find out, you know what was keeping you apart all these years? It's just that one thread is all you needed to bring the world
Yep.
together.
Yep. We'll get there, I think. We got to take it one day at a time right now and go from there. But I think we'll get there at some point. It'll be fun.
It's creeping there. I mean, it's just one of those things.
It seems like out here. What I mean by out here, I mean, away from the big cities. You get out where you get to Harvard and there's 10,000 people. That seems like a lot, but in the realm of things, that's a drop in the friggin' bucket. But it seems like people are more, how do I want to word this? I'm going to say open. People are more open to have a conversation instead of just shutting you out.
Right. Well, and that's the big thing. It goes back to even the tractor hobby. Walking around down there, I haven't heard any official numbers on attendance, but I would bet over the weekend there was probably close to 8,000 people probably come through that show.
That's quite a few.
And
plus all the vendors and everything else that are there, and the people that brought tractors.
I'm kind of including staff and everything there, but there had to be at least that much over the weekend, people coming and going. Some of them there were a whole weekend. But just that common thread of the tractors, and you get talking to different people and getting to know. Well, prime example, a friend of me and Jen's that I met through working the Mecum auctions, who live in Georgia. They came up and were parts vendors.
Oh, no kidding.
And that's what he does. That's his business. And
still, from Georgia.
Yeah, well, that's 3.5 hours for him. It's 8.5 hours for me to get down there.
I suppose.
So to him, that's a somewhat local show. And so we hadn't seen him in a couple of years. Before COVID was the last time he really sold anything with Mecum or come up. So we got to sit and hang out with him. Hadn't seen him in years, sit and visit with him and his wife. Well, then that Friday night, we were trying to get together with them, go out to dinner. And me and Jen Stewart took off, and we went somewhere else for a little bit, did some shopping and that. And all of a sudden, my phone rings, and it's my buddy John. He goes, hey, he says, one of the other guys here, one of my clients is camping here, and he's got dinner going. And I run it up, let him know what was going on and everything, and he'd be honored if you came over and had dinner with him.
Cool.
And I'm sitting there going, this guy don't know me from Adam. I mean, he just invited me over for dinner. Invited my whole family over for dinner. Well, this guy by the name of Cleveland Carter.
Hell of a name. I like him already.
Out of Bagsby, Georgia. Big mobile home. Probably, I would guess, in mid-70s. Black man out of Georgia. Well, our tractor hobby up here, we don't see black people in our hobby. And it's just because up here, there's just not a population, and they don't farm. Down there, he grew up on a farm. He grew up with a 40 John Deere. One row cultivating, he goes, oh, he says, I was so happy when my dad bought that. He says, I didn't have to walk behind them mules anymore. But just the hospitality. Me and Jen Stewart walk up, and he comes up, shakes my hand. I go, it's nice to meet you, Cleveland. I go, just an honor, because I've got to know him a little bit through, he's done some interviews on YouTube and that with different, but that's how I'm like, I should know this name, so I go do my research before we go there for dinner. So I'm like, I need to make sure I know who I'm talking to.
I need to know who I'm talking to, so I don't sound like an idiot.
Right. So I go up to him, and I mean, just a typical Southern gentleman. And it was actually quite funny. It was deep fried pork chops.
Yeah.
Collard greens.
Ooh.
Sweet corn with grits.
All right.
So
I'm digging
kind of like a mashed potato, cornmeal type.
I know what grits are.
I'm sitting there, I'm like, and then it was this big bowl of chicken and rice that had been kind of boiled, cooked, baked together. We all agreed that was probably the best meal out of the whole weekend, and we didn't have to pay for it. And
I need to pay you, sir, because this is 5 stars. Let me tell you what.
My son, who does not do spice or anything, and of course this is Southern cooking. So there's cayenne, pepper, everything else.
Oh, yeah.
And I sat there and I got one little piece of the deep fried pork chop. That was all that was left. So there was this foil packet with onions and a pork chop in it. And it had just like this red cayenne seasoning. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I take a bite of it. I go, got a little zip to it. So I look at my son. I go, hey, there's still a deep fried pork chop over there. You may want to grab that because you're not much on spice. Oh, I'm okay, Dad. He grabs a whole of it, and it was cooked in the foil packet. He's sitting there. He grabs a hunk of that pork chop, and he looks at me just in awe. I'm like, a little hot? No, Dad. He goes, that's probably the best pork chop I've ever eaten.
Thanks, son. I would have been cooking you pork chops for how many friggin' years?
I'm sitting there going, okay. I'm like, okay, I'm impressed. My son, 10 years old, and you've met my son.
Oh, yeah.
And my son at 10 years old is probably like talking to most 14, 15-year-olds. He stands up. He walks over to this guy, walks right up to him. He goes, Mr. Cleveland? And he looks at Stuart, and he goes, yes, son, what you need? He goes, Mr. Cleveland, he says, I don't know who did the cooking, but he says, that is probably one of the best meals I've had in a long time, sir. I appreciate you inviting me. Needless to say, we're sitting around this table, and there's a bunch of these southern guys. They're all from Alabama, Mississippi. They look at my son, and they hear him. He's northern. They can tell just by the way he talks. One of them comes up, and he goes, how do you know to do that? And he says, you need to keep doing that. You'll go a long ways in your life, son. If you can go up to someone, compliment them like that, and you finish, anytime you're talking to a man, you call him sir. You finish up what you're saying and say, sir. He goes, now if you're talking to his wife, well, all of a sudden she come over, and she's just doting over my boy. She goes, now you make sure you get plenty to eat there, boy. And, there's plenty of food and everything else. And Stuart, out of nowhere, just goes, yes, ma'am, I'll make sure I get plenty to eat. He went right back to it. Well, of course, they bring the watermelon out and the homemade pecan pie, and my son's just sitting there. But it's just a matter of, I didn't know this guy.
Yeah, you'd have never met him.
Met him.
Or any of them if you didn't get invited to that cookout.
Right. I mean,
it's just so cool.
And that's just the thing is, we sit here and we talk about the circle of friends and just how it grows exponentially. Every time you meet someone, they know someone else. But it's amazing how much that can come back around. And
yeah, it's pretty cool.
They get talking to someone. Oh, yeah, I've met that guy before. Oh, he's so – and it just goes around in a circle.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's pretty cool when we can get to that point in time. Holy cow, Max, we've been talking well over an hour already.
It's amazing
I
got a
little more editing to do this time.
It's amazing how quick it starts flowing.
Oh, yeah. You were worried. We were sitting like, what do you want to talk about? Well, I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Well, the thing is, one topic I figured we were going to talk about was start talking about doing some smoking and grilling and cooking on the grills and everything. We just talked about farm life.
Next time we'll have to do that.
Okay. We'll just have to make sure that way I got all the numbers in my head on what to cook this to or that to and how to do this.
I'm getting better on that smoking thing. It's taking me a little time, but I'm getting better at it.
You might as well just hit stop. We'll go another hour. We'll do another one. Then you can save that one for the bank so I won't have to come back.
That's no fun, though. I just like having you come back again.
Well, we'll do it again.
I know we will.
Not a problem.
Thanks for coming, Max.
No problem. Thanks for having me back.
We'll see you in the future.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.